Hey guys, welcome back to more HOA stories. 3 days away on a work trip. That's all it took for my neighbor to destroy a $50,000 tree and my kid's treehouse. He claimed the HOA approved it, but they didn't, and what happened next will blow your mind. Let's dive right into the homeowner association story. So I live in a quiet neighborhood that is run by an HOA. For the most part, it is not terrible. They send the usual annoying reminders about trash bins and paint colors, but they leave you alone if you pay your dues and keep your property looking decent. I've never really had a problem with them, and in my backyard there was this huge oak tree. It was the kind of tree you just don't see much anymore. White canopy, thick trunk, and perfect shade in the summer. When I bought the place, that tree was one thing that really sold me on the house. It was beautiful, and a few years ago I was getting some work done in my yard, and my friend asked if I ever had the tree appraised, and when I told him I hadn't, he explained why it was important. That a tree that big and old could be worth a lot, and if it got damaged without being injured or appraised, I would not be able to get anything for damages. I did what he said and I had an arborist evaluate it. He told me the tree was worth over 50 grand. I did not even know trees could be appraised, but apparently old oaks in good condition are a big deal. I kept the paperwork just because it seemed important. That turned out to be the smartest thing I ever did. Later, I built a small treehouse for my kids, nothing fancy, that belonged on Treehouse Masters or something, just a few boards, railings and a little ladder, and I even made sure it followed HOA guidelines. I sent in the form, got written approval, and everything was fine. The HOA board at the time said it was solidly built. Things stayed that way for years, but then one day, a new guy on the block started making himself known. He lived 2 houses over and joined the HOA board like he was running for office or something. The kind of person who thought he was a bigger deal than he actually was. He always had something to say about other people's yards, fences or cars, and he also looked like he had money. Expensive car, fancy-looking watch, and making a bunch of expensive updates to his property. That kind of stuff. He never said much to me directly, just the occasional comment about my tree, dropping leaves near his side. I brushed it off because leaves are just leaves, and they kind of fall all over the place, especially when it's windy, so I didn't think much of it. It turns out, I should have. A few months later I had to go out of town for work, nothing major, just a few days away. Before leaving, I did my usual rounds. I locked the shed, double-checked the gate, and made sure the house and yard were in good shape. The weather was supposed to be nice that week, so I didn't think twice about anything. I dropped my kids off at my mom's house, single dad here, and when I got back I walked into the backyard and stopped dead in my tracks. The tree was gone. Not trimmed, not damaged, gone. Nothing left but a white flat stump and a pile of sawdust. The treehouse was a splintered mess in the grass, like someone had taken a wrecking ball to it. For a few seconds, I honestly could not process it. I thought maybe a storm had taken it out while I was gone, but there hadn't been one. Then I noticed the tire tracks, big ones, and a ton of sawdust that was clearly from the stump being ground up. This was not an accident, it was a professional job. Someone had paid to have my tree removed. And with a tree that big, whoever did it had a bunch of extra money lying around. A little while later I saw my neighbor in his yard. He called out something about how the HOA finally took care of that hazard. I didn't even respond. I just stood there staring at him, realizing what he had done. I called the HOA help number right after that, and the woman on the phone sounded confused and said no work orders or removal approvals had been issued for my property, and she even checked twice. So it was not them, at least not directly. That meant it just had to be him. I hung up and went back outside. He had already gone inside by then, probably figuring I couldn't do anything about it. And honestly, at that moment, I didn't know what I could do. I just stood there looking at the empty space where that big old tree used to be, trying to wrap my head around the fact that someone thought they had the right to just take it down. The only positive thing at that moment is that I hadn't picked up my kids yet. They were not super young anymore at 10 and 12, but they still used the treehouse as a hangout. I knew telling them was gonna upset them too. The next morning, I filed a formal complaint with the HOA. I sent pictures of the sawdust pile where the stump was, a picture of a root you could still kinda see, the tire marks and the remains of the treehouse. I even attached the old approval letter showing the treehouse had been allowed years ago. I figured once they saw everything, they would take it seriously, and it took them 3 days to get back at me. When they finally did, they said they had reviewed the situation and spoken with the other homeowner, and according to them, he claimed the tree was a safety hazard and that he'd been acting in the community's best interest. That was it. No real apology, no plan to fix it. They said they would fine him a few $100s for performing unapproved work. That was the phrase they actually did, unapproved of work. Like, cutting down a $50,000 tree was just some minor paperwork mistake. I called them right back and said that it wasn't even close to being good enough. They told me it was a civil matter between neighbors and that they had done all they could. So to recap, my tree was gone, my kid's treehouse was destroyed, and the guy responsible got what was basically a parking ticket. I went over to talk to him again, hoping maybe he would admit what he did or at least show some kind of remorse, but no luck. He doubled down and said the HOA had given him permission, which was a lie, and he knew it. Before I could even tell him how I knew it was a dirty lie, he started going on a rant again, how the treehouse violated bylaws and how the tree was dropping leaves on his side. I had to walk away before I said or did something that I would regret or could be used in a courtroom against me. That night, I dug out the old appraisal paperwork from the arborist, the one showing the tree's value, and I had a feeling that I would be needing it. I was not just about to let it go, that tree was not just decoration, it was part of the property's value, and I had proof of it, so the next day I called the same arborist who had done the original appraisal years back. He still had the records of his inspection filed away, which really helped. I told him what happened and he came out later that week. He looked at where the stump was ground up, the yard and the remains of the treehouse, and you could tell he was trying not to look shocked. He said whoever took it down had done a clean, professional job and an expensive one at that. He gave me an updated written report confirming that the tree had been worth around $50,000, maybe more given its size and condition, and he also added a note that the tree showed no signs of disease or damage, meaning there was no reason for it to be cut down. Based on what he could see of the stump and remaining root system, combined with photos I had of my kids in the treehouse and his older appraisal, he was able to say with confidence that the tree was healthy. I was still amazed that there were people out there that knew so much about trees and their value. That report was going to be solid gold. Next, I started tracking down the crew that had done the work. I talked to a few local tree service companies until I found the right one. The guy on the phone was hesitant at first, but once I told him what happened, he said straight up that the neighbor had hired them. He was given paperwork with HOA authorization to remove the tree. That is when I knew I had everything I needed. Honestly, it's probably way more than I needed. I spoke to a lawyer who told me this was a clear case of property destruction. He suggested I sue for the appraised value plus damages, and I agreed immediately. We filed the lawsuit not long after. The neighbor was served a few days later. He tried to act cool about it, walking around like nothing had happened, but I could tell he was rattled. I didn't say a word to him. I didn't need to. He knew exactly what he had done and now he was finally gonna have to deal with it. When the court date finally came, I'll admit I was nervous. I never sued anyone before and I'm not the kind of person who likes drama or conflict, but there was no way I was going to let this guy get away with it. He showed up dressed like he thought he was about to give a business presentation, all confidence, no apology. The minute I saw that smug look, I knew I'd made the right call filing the lawsuit. His lawyer started by saying the tree was a danger to nearby properties and that my treehouse was not compliant with HOA safety standards. Basically, the same nonsense he has been spouting since day one. Then my lawyer got up and started laying everything out in order. The old HOA approval letter for the treehouse, the original arborist report, the new appraisal confirming the value, and the photos I had taken. And finally, the written statement from the tree service owner saying he'd been told it was an HOA removal order and his copy of the HOA paperwork. The arborist also testified. He said plainly that the tree was healthy and posed no danger to anyone. The judge asked a few questions about the appraisal process and then looked right at the neighbor and asked if he had any documentation from the HOA to him saying that he could get the tree cut down. But he didn't. His lawyer tried to shift the blame, saying it was a misunderstanding and done in good faith, but that didn't fly either. You cannot accidentally spend thousands of dollars removing someone else's tree, plus the fact that he had used the HOA letterhead to pretend that something was approved when it actually wasn't. That just dug him in deeper. It was so clearly planned out, and in the end, the judge ruled completely in my favor. My neighbor was ordered to pay the full appraised value of the tree, $50,000, plus additional damages for the destruction of the treehouse and legal fees. My lawyer did tell me at the start that the paperwork could be considered fraud, but since this was just a civil case, he wouldn't get in trouble for that here. When the judge read the decision, my neighbor didn't say a word, just stared straight ahead like he was still trying to process that he had actually lost. I walked out of there feeling lighter than I had in months. Word spread through the neighborhood faster than I expected. I didn't tell anyone about the lawsuit, but people talk, and HOA communities love gossip. Within a week, everyone knew that the self-appointed HOA enforcer who cut down my tree had lost big in court. I started noticing the shift right away. He was not strutting around the neighborhood anymore or barking at people about trash cans or mailboxes. His confidence disappeared overnight. He would still go to the HOA meetings, but he sat in the back, quiet, while everyone else avoided eye contact with him. He was kicked off the board for obvious reasons, and eventually someone told me he'd been struggling financially to pay the judgment to me. I didn't feel bad about it though. I mean, it was a problem that he created for himself. If he wanted to try and get sympathy from me or anybody else, it was not gonna happen. The best part was how the HOA reacted afterwards though. Suddenly, they were very interested in making sure all board decisions were properly documented. They sent out an email about transparency improvements and individual liability, and I think my case scared them straight. The neighbor stopped maintaining his yard after that, and you could tell he was done with the place. The grass started getting high, and the half-finished backyard projects just sat there. It stayed that way for several months before a for sale sign went up. I didn't celebrate or anything, I just remember walking by one morning and seeing the moving truck out front. He was out there loading boxes, avoiding everyone's eyes. I did not say a word. After all that noise and arrogance, the silence was nice. After he moved out, things finally went back to normal. The new people who bought his place were friendly and minded their own business. The neighborhood felt peaceful again. A few months later, I used part of the settlement money to plant a new tree in the same spot. It is smaller obviously, but healthy and growing fast. I even rebuilt a little version of the old treehouse, not the same of course, but it is something. The HOA has been quiet since then. They learned their lesson about overstepping boundaries and now make sure every approval and rule is written down. Nobody has tried to tell me what I can or cannot do with my own yard ever again. I still miss that big oak, but I take care of the new one and hope it will just have as long of a life as the other one. Maybe in a few hundred years somebody else will build a treehouse for their kids in it. Sometimes you don't need to yell or make a scene to get justice. You just have to stand your ground, be patient, and let the truth do the heavy lifting. And yeah guys, if you enjoy the HOA stories, please don't forget to like the video. And the next one is another crazy neighbor story that is titled "Scumbag Neighbor Broke into My Vehicle and Stole My Stuff, so I Returned the Favor." So I rented a duplex in my early 20s and my neighbor was a wannabe gangster type and made the mistake of breaking into my vehicle one night. I had a small SUV with a removable soft top, so the neighbor figured it would be easy picking to just peel back the top and help himself to my stereo, amplifier, CDs and some other miscellaneous stuff. I discovered the break-in early in the morning after it occurred. I knew for certain who the culprit was. We were not in a heavily populated area, and my neighbor was well known for thievery. I waited around for him to leave his place, and when the opportunity arose, I went around the back of the house and looked through the bedroom window to find that sure enough my stuff was sitting right on the floor in there. I instinctively tried the window, and as luck would have it, the sash went right up. Bingo! I hopped through and quickly surveyed the items lying around. It occurred to me that I could get some excellent revenge here if I played it right, so rather than just recoup my stuff and wind up in a fight over it, I borrowed a marker and proceeded to write my name on all my stuff and also a few choice items of his, just for good measure. I then climbed back out the window and waited. When he finally came back, I called for some police presence and explained to them how my vehicle got robbed, and I knew it was the neighbor due to seeing through the window. We then knock on his door, and I can still remember the look on his face seeing me and the cop standing there. He was not even close to ready for the encounter and almost certainly had drugs on him, so he was very cooperative given the circumstances. I politely explained that I know he broke into my vehicle and I needed him to return my stuff immediately or I will have to press charges. He went and retrieved my things and I pointed out my name written on them to the officer. I asked about my other stuff while he looked back puzzled and dumbfounded. I rattled off the other couple of choice items of his that I also put my name on earlier, and the look on his face while he handed over his own stuff to me while the cop was standing there was just priceless. The next one is a malicious compliance family story. For context, my brother is an inconsiderate douche canoe. It was a free day for me. I had a job with random scheduling, so it was either a weekday or a weekend. I'm chilling at home about to cook up something for dinner or late lunch when I get a phone call. 4:30 p.m. My brother called me and expected me to jump up and go pick him up from his job because none of the family were available on a busy weekend for them. When I say he expected, I mean he called me up and said the exact words, "You have to pick me up." This was before he had his own car and license, around 18, his job was on the other side of town, a full 30 to 40 minute drive or more depending on traffic, and it was at 4:30 p.m, just before hectic work traffic at 5 p.m. If I had refused to get him, he would have called either of our parents and whined until he complained to me to go pick him up. Understanding the box I'd been put in, a Grinch-like smile grew across my face as I made up my mind. What did I do? I picked him up and then made 3 stops along the way home, 3 long stops. The first was at a gas station. I'd been low on gas and he couldn't complain because I was his only ride. At the second stop, I pulled in at a restaurant to eat inside, Tijuana Flats. The whole time, he's complaining that I should take it to go and that we are only 15 minutes from home. The whole time he is whining about me wasting time and that he had to do homework. That homework took like 10 minutes and he just passed out with his TV and Xbox on. Eventually he even called grandma to complain, so much so that she called me to ask if I'd offered to buy him any food while there. I did, and then told him, tough, he wanted the ride, he got it. And finally at stop 3, a supermarket 4 miles from home, I needed a few groceries. Around 6:15 p.m. to 6:20 p.m. when we finally got home, he complained like a little witch to our parents, grandma and dad, but when my dad got home from work he just laughed, gave me a high five and was like, "Why didn't I ever think of that?" And I was like, "Hey, maybe next time. I'll come along so we can make a few extra stops." P.S. he had been doing the "you have to give me a ride" thing without a police inside for a while now, and it was starting to get on everyone's nerves. And the next one is a beautiful petty revenge fence drama story. A previous home I owned had previously been rented, and well, that tenant had thrown up a quick little chain link fence for his dog. Had the corners right at the corner of the house, just a quick fix that got the job done. Basically, I don't have a dog, so fence, no fence did not matter to me. The day I moved in, my very young neighbor came over and asked, since she ran a daycare from her house, that was a whole other nightmare, that she would really like to put up a fence, and to save money, could they just tie into mine and save the cost of fencing an entire side of the fence? Now, I may be younger, but I'm not dumb. I knew that if they did that, they would be fencing in part of my property, and after a certain number of years with their maintenance of it, they would then own that property between our houses. Now, we are not talking a lot here, the houses were maybe 15 feet across, but if they did that, they would own everything up to the edge of my house. Even my air conditioner unit would be on their property. So then, I told her this and said no, she cannot now or ever tie into the fence. Also mentioned that interaction with my realtor, and she about threw a fit. Seems this person tried asking her the same thing, and she told her the same thing too. Now, if this was just a one-time thing trying her luck, it wouldn't be a big deal, but she kept asking off and on for a few years and I kept saying no. Even the husband came over to ask, maybe to intimidate a single woman. Still said no. I even did the research and got the actual property line map that showed exactly where our property lines were. One day I saw a whole bunch of chain link fencing in their backyard, but not nearly enough to fence all the sites they needed to. They were gonna try and tie in anyway, despite me repeatedly telling them no. So that night I took down, rolled up the fence and dug up every single fence post. Now the neighbor had to come out and watch the kids she was supposed to be watching because my fence was not there anymore, so the kids had more avenues to escape. Plus it took them a bit longer to order more of the chain link fence and posts they suddenly needed. When I sold the house, I gave the new owner, a single man, a care package which included the official property line map and a note to watch those neighbors like a hawk. My realtor, yep, the same one, I loved her so much I used her again, knew the entire story and gave him the rundown as well. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. There are a couple of ways I can format this story, but for it to make the most sense, I think I will tell you what the neighbor did first without our knowledge and then get into the meat of things. Now, this neighbor is really big on the HOA and thinks that he has some sort of authority to do anything he wants. Several times we have had to kick him off of our property and even out of our pool. With him trying to claim it's public land because of the HOA, only for us to tell him that it is still our private property. And of course that he is not welcome. We have even threatened to call the police on him for trespassing if he didn't quit. His next solution was something that I find to be disgusting. So we share a fence and it does a pretty good job of keeping his wandering eyes away from us. He ended up drilling a hole in the fence just large enough that he could sit down on his side and look through. We have bushes over there, so we would have never seen it, but he was getting a great view of us and the backyard. My wife and I are the kind of people that don't like being cooped up inside, but also like our private time. Our backyard is perfect for that, and we love our setup. We have some outdoor couches, a speaker to hook up music, a grill, and a nice pool. And as some couples do, we sometimes enjoy swimming naked with each other. It's one of the biggest benefits to having a private pool in my opinion. Remember that at this point we had no idea about the spy a-hole and assumed that we were alone. So instead, our neighbor was watching the entire time, and from what I found out later was sitting there for a good while with us being totally naked. And yeah, there's a line between peeper and creep, and with the amount of time he was watching before doing anything else, I think that he crossed that line into creep. And by the way guys, I think if you drill a hole into a wall or fence to watch your neighbor, I'm pretty sure that makes you a creep by default. Anyway, at some point during his free show, he came to the conclusion that he was offended by it and actually called the police on us. You can imagine the embarrassment as our backyard filled up with police and we had to get out of the pool and get towels around ourselves. About 5 cops in total, and my wife was mortified. She wanted to just go into the house and never come out again. I was more curious about what they were doing in my backyard since we didn't call them. Me? Can I help you, officers? We got a call about public indecency. Apparently you and your wife were exposing yourselves. Me? I mean, yes, we were obviously nude, but I assumed it was fine in our own backyard. We have tall fences and wouldn't have ever gone into the front like this. I mean, you can see how embarrassed we are right now. That was when the neighbor started running over and yelling towards the cops. Neighbor, excuse me, I called to report these heathens for exposing themselves to me. It was disgusting, and as an HOA board member I can tell you right now that it is both illegal and against our bylaws. Officer, I'm sorry sir, hold on for one moment so we can make sure we got this right. So this couple exposed themselves to you and then got into their pool. Neighbor, yes. Officer, what were they doing on your property? Neighbor, they weren't, they were right here. Upon asking how he knew about it was when it was revealed to everybody about his magic little hole in the fence. He should have been glad that cops were around because I might have beaten him up for spying on us and seeing my wife naked. I couldn't stop myself from yelling and the police needing to have us be away from each other in order to get everything straight. I was busy having my own little fit wanting him arrested for spying on us, with the officer saying that they couldn't arrest him on the spot for that and I would have to file a separate report. For now, they had to finish with the indecent exposure issue. Neighbor was talking to another officer and coming up with his own reasoning of why it was considered that. For people that don't know, it's only illegal to be nude like that if you're in a public space or even around people that don't consent in a private space. Neither one of those rules were the case, so we were not exposing ourselves to anybody. It was not our fault that he was staring at us through a peephole without us knowing. I managed to catch some of the conversation going on between neighbor and an officer. Neighbor, but I saw them nude. That means they were exposing themselves to me. Officer, it's their private property. Unless you own this home and pool, they have every right to swim in it like that. You should not and cannot go looking at people through holes in a fence. Neighbor, this is an HOA neighborhood. That means there's no such thing as private property. It's all public and I had to watch them to see if they were following the bylaws. I have the right to do that. Officer, I don't know what rules it says in your bylaws, but I do know that our laws go above that, and you are wrong in this case. If you want to file a lawsuit against them, I cannot stop you, but I can advise you that you will lose. In fact, if anybody has a case, it is them for invasion of privacy. The police eventually left and neighbor was forced back on his side of the fence. I know the police told us we could sue him, but unless he was gonna try first, we didn't want to bother getting a lawyer and all of that. He most likely would have ended up with a warning and getting free legal counsel from the HOA or something, while we would have to pay out of pocket. He did warn us that he wasn't done with this and was taking it all the way to the HOA president. Then supposedly we would get sent to court and fined for exposing ourselves. That threat has yet to come and I have a feeling will never actually happen. He might not have a brain, but I'm sure at the very least the HOA lawyers do. What I did make sure was his hole was totally covered up. I added more bushes to really block him in case he tried to drill another hole into the fence. I also inspected regularly to see if he got any ideas. Again, so far he seems to be quiet and probably got told off by the HOA president. Still, I don't think I will ever figure out his logic on the whole situation. You can type in the comments if you think that what we did was wrong and if you side with him. The police siding with us was enough, and we will not stop enjoying ourselves on our private property because of one a-hole. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I'm curious what you have to say about this. Do you think that OP was in the wrong or not? And the next one is a petty revenge story that is titled Ice Cream Man Stiffed My Kid. So my kid ran outside to get ice cream from the ice cream man. My kiddo returned a little sad. I asked what was wrong and she said, "I asked the ice cream man for my change and he gave me this lollipop and drove off before I could say anything." Well, suffice to say, my kid doesn't like lollipops, and even if she did, it would not have been a fair trade, not by a long shot. Anyway, I drove over to Costco and bought a few boxes of ice cream bars, and for the next few weeks, my kid shared ice cream with all of the kids on our side of the neighborhood. My kid made some new friends, and no one on our side of the neighborhood bought from the ice cream man during that time. Unintended side effect, when we ran out, other parents started chipping in and provided snacks for the kids who played outside. And yeah guys, thank you for watching, please don't forget to like the video and I will see you again tomorrow.